Hello. So it's pretty well known that there are a litany of potential derivations for the modern day celebration of Christmas. Now, what I'm going to do here is to share information from a couple of old sources. I'm going to correct some errors that pop up in modern day sources and generally just discuss this phenomenon that seems to revolve around the winter solstice. So it's pretty well established that one of the most easily traceable celebrations of Christmas goes back to the celebration of Sol Invictus. It was a Roman festival that took place on December 25th, which was the winter solstice in the Julian calendar, prior to the Reformation that led to the Gregorian calendar. So this was the celebration of Mithra as the unconquerable sun. Any individual that tries to separate the character of Mithra from the unconquerable sun has no clue what they're talking about. It's the same being. And again, this is to say, I don't know if I incorrectly said it just now, but let me clarify. The winter solstice celebration was on the 25th in the Julian calendar. So this winter solstice celebration was commensurate with the date of Christmas in modern day. So just in case anybody's confused about why there's a discrepancy between the winter solstice and Christmas. As you can see here, as a side note, says that it was a 7 day period of parties, banquets, and gifts exchanges. Right? The whole seven thing, as I've talked about in multiple videos now, it's a Mithraic concept, it's a Gnostic concept, whatever you want to call it. It's a recurring concept that points to the underlying tradition. 7 grades of initiation, 7 grades of ascension, the seven classical planets in alchemy, and so on and so forth, the seven Ameshaspenta, the seven archangels, the seven cardinal sins, the seven Sabeti, the Cabieri, the Corybantes, so on and so forth. Now, on the note of the 25th in particular, I've already mentioned this one in one of my previous videos, but again, quote, the importance we may gather from the saint's calendar tablet translated by Professor Seishi, and that is Archibald Seishi, professor of Assyriology in the early 20th century. The 25th day is the processional day of Bel and Beltis of Babylon, a lucky day. In the night, the king presents his freewill offering to Bel before the star of the foundation. The winter solstice was a natural commencement of the year, and the Boeotian, Delphian, and Bithynian years began at this period. Now, and this is the tablet of the 30 stars. Now, in ancient Iran, or actually in modern Iran, they still celebrate Yalda night. Yalda night is the birth of the light, the birth of Mithra, which takes place in the winter solstice. And this is why those in the know need to be more ardent or enthusiastic about correcting these errors when, for instance, modern day scholars say things like, Mithraism, we don't know much about Mithraism because it's an ancient mystery religion that was only practiced in the ancient Mediterranean or in the Roman Empire. No, it's still alive and well. We actually know an insane amount about it, to be honest. We know enough about ancient Mithraism and the general interwoven mystery rites that come along with it that it would take you multiple lifetimes to learn it all. So when any individual, whether they be a esteemed scholar or not, implies that we don't know much about these things, you need to find a different source. In The Mythology of All Races by Stephen Herbert Langdon, page 16, absorption into the Roman Empire 106 AD. They were a North Arabic race who used the Aramaic script, and their principal male deity is Dusara, rendered into Greek as Dusares, and identified by the Greeks with Dionysus. The name means he of Shara, he of the mountain range Ashara at Petra, and he is a sun god according to Strabo. Epiphanius, bishop of Salamis in Cyprus, writing in the 4th century, preserves the only illuminating information about the mythology of this great cult of the Nabateans, and he was born and educated in Palestine and served in a monastic order there. His statement must be taken authoritatively. He says that the Nabateans praise the Virgin whose Arabic name is Chabu. In Nabatean, the Arabic nominative ending in u is regularly preserved in proper names, and Epiphanius undoubtedly heard the word Kabu, square stone, symbol in Nabatean religion for both Dusares and the great mother goddess Alat of the Nabateans. An Arabic writer says that a four-sided stone was worshipped as Alat, who in a Nabatean inscription was called Mother of the Gods. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Hmm. Hmm. Well, how about that? Epiphanius says that the Nabateans praised the Virgin, whose Arabic name is Chabu. In Nabatean, the Arabic nominative ending in "u" is regularly preserved in proper names, and Epiphanius undoubtedly heard the word Kabu, square stone, symbol in Nabatean religion for both Dusares and the great mother goddess Alat of the Nabateans. An Arabic writer says that a four-sided stone was worshipped as Alat, who in Nabatean in a Nabatean inscription was called the Mother of the Gods. Sounds a hell of a lot like Kybele, doesn't it? Literally and allegorically, I suppose. Mother of the Gods on figure 4 is seen the reverse of a copper coin of the Roman Emperor Trajan Decius, struck at Bostra, showing the sacred batil or stone pillar of Dusares, bearing the inscription Actia Dusaria, the Dusarian Games. Suidas, the Greek lexicographer, under the word. When it comes to Greek words like this, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try. So you're just going to have to look at it yourself. It says that the object of Dusaria's worship was a black stone, 4 feet high and 2 feet wide, standing on a base of gold. Moreover, Epiphanius states that Dusarius was the offspring of the Virgin Chabu and only son of the Lord. The patriarchs of Nabatean cities came to Petra. This is bothering me now. I'm going to learn Greek. It'll happen. I'll get there. Okay, the patriarchs of Nabatean cities came to Petra to assist in the festival of his birth, which was celebrated on the 25th of December. Worship of a dying god, son of the Earth Mother, was the principal cult of this North Arabian people during the period immediately before and after the life of Jesus of Nazareth in Palestine. The title of the mother goddess Alat here is Mother of the Gods. Here, and as a translation of the title of the great mother goddess of Babylonia, Belit Ilani, Queen of the Gods, whose title in Sumerian is also Goddess Mother. Dusares and Alat, the Nabateans, and Arabian reflex of the great Babylonian myth of Tammuz and Ishtar. And if the god is identified with Dionysus, the original character common to both is that of a sun god and patron of fertility. Strabo describes the Nabateans as a particularly abstemious people. The Greeks and Romans called Dusares the Arabian Dionysus or Bacchus, and a statue of him found in the Huron portrays him as a deity of the vine. The cornucopia and patera are also characteristic of Dusares on coins of Nabatean cities. As an Arabian Bacchus, Dusares is a Greek and Roman deity. As a god of fertility represented by a batil, he is a local Arabic earth and sun deity. And as son of the virgin earth goddess, he is a Babylonian deity. The celebration of his birth in December at Petra in the northern cities and of Bostra and Adra in the Haran with games and festivities is a replica of the spring festivities at Babylon, when the death, burial, and resurrection of Marduk were celebrated with weeping, which was exchanged for rejoicing. The meaning, and here's a correction coming up to a modern day claim. The meaning of the Actia Dusaria at Petra may be inferred from the similar festival at Alexandria in Egypt. They're called after an unexplained Egyptian word, Kekelia, or perhaps Kechelia, or in Greek, the Cronia, which also occurred by night on the 25th of December. The Cronia, which also occurred by night on the 25th of December. Okay, so what does Wikipedia have to say about Cronia in modern day? The Cronia, held in honor of Kronos on the 12th day of Hectombeon, the first month of the Attic calendar, and roughly equivalent to the latter part of July and first part of August. The festival was also celebrated in parts of Ionia, and in these places the month was called Cronion. Scholars usually interpret it as a celebration of the midsummer first harvest. And that's about it. That's about it. The only reference to Christmas is down here in a footnote which isn't really a reference to Christmas. They just make a comparison, right? They say that since the Cronia was significant enough to name the whole month Cronion, something analogous to saying Christmas instead of December, the event was important to the people of Ionia, right? So it's just, right, like they don't say anything about this. Now, how could this possibly be? I don't know. The study of history is complex. It's not half as solid as you would think it is. It is not half as solid as you would think it is. And this is why it's important to always double check for yourself all of the sources, because you will come to find quite often that there are discrepancies between what people believe and what the sources have to say. Now, I'm not dismissing all of this. Obviously, they have to have a reason for saying all of this, but I'm saying that they completely left out of any interpretation this mention of, quote, they're called after an unexplained Egyptian work atelier in Greek the Cronia was, which also occurred by night on the 25th of December. In this festival, an image of a babe was taken from the temple sanctuary and greeted with loud acclamation by the worshippers, saying the Virgin has begotten. Right now, I mean, call me crazy. That's pretty significant stuff to just leave out of the interpretation. And keep in mind, this comes from Stephen Herbert Langdon. He was the professor of Assyriology, which replaced Archibald Sashi, who we just referenced in the 30 Stars tablet, early 20th century. And he was the curator of the Babylonian section at the Museum of the University of Pennsylvania. So, I mean, like, this dude knows what he's talking about. So why is it that his words don't make it? And, you can come up with a million different ideas for why not the for why the information hasn't made it into modern day. So I don't know why I'm struggling over that. You could come up with a million different reasons, but as I've said before, sometimes the simple fact of the matter is that information simply doesn't make it into the modern day curriculum. These are very obscure topics, uh, not a large audience to begin with, very few people that are even capable or even who want to understand these things, so on and so forth. Moving on. This is going to be from The Ruling Races of Prehistoric Times. I think this is essay two, or sorry, volume two, and this is from James Francis Hewitt Catharinas. Quote, in the Soma sacrifice, the Soma distilled from the holy plant was poured in libations and drunk by the priests. Sorry, I was looking around the page. Okay, who ate the offered food, but in Greece, the priests gave the penitents the sacred food and drink. The declaration made by each penitent at the close of the ceremony explains both the ritual and its meaning. Each of them had to say, I have fasted and have drunk the kykeon, made of flour and water and pounded mint, with the bread and water of life mixed with the sap of the green tree mother, or the green mother tree. I have taken from the Greek word, the seed grain jar, after tasting the sacred cakes, the bread of life, taken from the Greek word. Is this saying Corey? I don't know. I have placed them in the Greek word, the basket, that is the lichnos or sari, the winnowing basket, and from the Greek word, I have placed them. Oh my gosh. See, my thing is like, why don't they just provide the English translation as they're doing this? Anyway, from this, it is clear that the sacrificer, having drunk from the cup, the elementary seed of vital power, because you know damn well it's not like every single last one of these dudes speaks Greek. You know, at least one of these dudes had to be doing what I'm doing, and like, okay, what the hell does that mean? Anyway, the elementary seed of vital power dwelling in the blessed bread and water took the young god, the seed of the new life, the cakes baked in the generating and cleansing fire from the mother jar, and partook of his body, thus incorporating into himself the divine seed. What was left he placed in the winnowing basket to be there cleansed from any taint it might have received by being touched by him before he was made holy by eating it, and he returned it after its purification to the mother jar. In this analysis of the myths, in the most significant of the Greek and Roman ceremonies, of the several stages of the sacramental sacrifice of the corn growing races, we find a complete history of the union of the three parent tribes, a history which would make doubtless a history which would doubtless be much more clear, rather, to us than it is at present if we could see, as the Greek penitents did, the scenes of the myth of Kor acted before them, or the Virgin, right? Kor, the Virgin. The evidence shows us that the confederated tribes were the sons of the fire god, the revolving pole, and his two wives, his mother and daughter, the Mother Earth and the seed grain, as we can trace the development of the national ritual as it passed from India to Phrygia. If you want to know more about the fire god, the revolving pole's two wives, check out my video on Nabu. And then along with that, the videos on Moses. Okay, so again, the evidence shows us that the confederated tribes were the sons of the fire god, the revolving pole, and his two wives, his mother and daughter, the Mother Earth and the seed grain, as we can trace the development of the national ritual as it passed from India to Phrygia, and from Phrygia back to India, and from thence, when the ritual of the regenerating sacrifice of the Semite Cushites had been evolved, we trace it in an altered form to Greece, as the sacrifice of the greater Eleusinian, celebrated in Bodrominion, the month of the course, Dromos of the ox, Bos, the month of the autumnal equinox, which succeeded the winter solstice, as the time when the barley-growing races of Syria began their year. But this last importation had been preceded by the earlier sacrifice of the Dorians, sons of the Dor or Tur, the pole, and also the sons of the twin gods, who were first day and night, and afterwards the stars Castor and Pollux. This was preserved in the mysteries of February, called Anasterion, or the month of the flower goddess, and of the Saturnalia of the Indian Naga races, whose customs were, as I show in essays 3 and 6, brought to Greece by those who were reputed in mythic history to be the voyagers in the heavenly ship Argo, and by the overland traders. And we're going to come back to the ship Argo. Actually, that's our next portion. So let's get into that. Okay, this will be the longest section, perhaps, but it'll be about Saturn, Noah, some of these earlier connections. This is from the origin of pagan idolatry. It's from 1890. Sometimes it says it at the top of the page, but it's from George Stanley Faber, late 1800s. Okay, so we're going to pick up. Saturn, however, is not always reputed to be the son of heaven and earth. Plato tells us that he and Rhea and their kindred deities were the children of Oceanus and Thetis, or of the sea and the ark, thus intimating, as Bocart well observes, that Noah and his family were born allegorically from the deluge. Accordingly, while Saturn is sometimes mystically said to have hidden his children in a sea-girt cave, he is at other times literally represented as sailing over the ocean in a ship. The old Italians indeed pretended that his voyage terminated on the shores of Latium, and that he was there received by Janus. But Ovid, as the faithful depository of ancient tradition, carefully instructs us that his vessel did not reach the Tuscan River until the god had first wandered in it all over the whole globe. In memory of this voyage, his token was a ship, which appeared on the reverse of the coins, stamped with the double face of Janus. The enclosure of the Great Father within the ark, symbolized by an insular cavern in the midst of the ocean, was viewed as a state of confinement, and he himself, particularly throughout the East, was thought during the time of his incarceration to be wrapped in a profound death-like slumber. Both these ideas occur in the fabulous history of Saturn, though in two different mythologies. We are told by Macrobius that, according to the Latin ritual, the image of the god continued bound with chains in his temple during the whole of every year, except one particular day which introduced the festival of Saturnalia, but that on this day, which occurred in December, and which was eminently dedicated to him, he was solemnly set at liberty by the removal of his fetters. Having lost all memory on the origin of this custom, the later Romans attempted to account for it by resorting to physics, but its real import was that the deity of the ark was confined within his vessel during a year and was let loose at the end of it. When Saturn was set at liberty, the people gave themselves up to mirth, jesting, ebriety, exulting much in the same manner as the Egyptians did when the lost Osiris was found again, whereas the Persians and Babylonians did during the continuance of an exactly similar festival, which they denominated Saka or Sakya, from their god Saka or Sasak or Buddha Sakya. Now, I'm not sure that that's a randomly massive vehicle. Hopefully, it didn't show up too much on the audio, but okay. Anyway, this is about the information, not the audio, right? So, okay, I don't know that I've released these videos yet on my channel again because I've had to restart multiple times and refocus, but I've talked about the Saka a good bit. A really good source is Jason Rezajani when it comes to the Sakas, particularly in an esoteric context. There's a couple of channels that are starting to resurface with this information, or not the channels, but that are starting to facilitate a resurface of this information. One of them is like Taliesin's Map, and there's another Ald Boy, another channel that goes by Ald Boy, and they talk about the Sakas and whatnot. Basically, these people populated the entirety of the Eurasian steppe from in the east on the outer expanse of the Gobi Desert of China, all the way in the west over to, I mean, Portugal, right? I mean, all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, because it was there in Spain and France. They co-founded. Okay, I'm not going to get into all that. I'm getting distracted. So the Sakas are very prevalent. They show up a lot. It's from them the Grail mysteries come. They are the connection between the Nords and the Iranians. It's this whole weird thing. Oh, and on a side note on that, I wanted to mention that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, there's a there's a part in there where I think it's like Ivor's brother is talking to like one of the assassins from Persia. And I don't know who it is. At some point, they say it's almost like they were related. And it's like, yeah, because one of them who's writing the scripts or writing the game, right? They're familiar with this type of stuff or from these ancient authors, or I guess in the case of George Stanley Faber from the early 20th or 19th century, late 19th century, who always make these connections between the Nords and the Iranians. So again, as the Egyptians did when the lost Osiris was found, or as the Persians and Babylonians did during the continuance of an exactly similar festival, which they denominated Sakya from their god Sako or Sasak or Buddha Sakya. Okay, so right here, the annual festival Sakya lasted 5 days, the days themselves being called the Sakyan days, and they were evidently the five epigomene or supernumerary days of the year, which just means like the intercalary days that are like extra. So during this Eastern festival, both men and women gave themselves up to the most unrestrained drunkenness and lasciviousness. Masters changed place with their servants, who were then allowed to act the part of their superiors, while their superiors sustained their part. And one of these temporary lords, who was distinguished for the occasion by the titles of Ganes, played the part of king and was decorated with the robes of royalty. The festival was celebrated wherever there was a temple of Anais, Anahita, who was the magnamator of the Persians, and who was honored like the Babylonian Mylitta and the Cyprian Venus by the solemn prostitution of female chastity. It has been inquired why this festival was called Sakya, and some have imagined that it was instituted by Cyrus in commemoration of a victory which he obtained over the Scythian Saka, and that the Babylonians borrowed it from the Persians when they became subject to their empire. But there is nothing in it which bears the least resemblance to the commemoration of a victory, and there is much reason for believing that it prevailed among the Babylonians prior to their subjugation by the Medo-Persians. Berosus, in a fragment preserved by Athenaeus, mentions the festival by its name, Sakya, as a Babylonian institution, without giving the least hint that it was first introduced by Cyrus, and Ctesias, in his work on the Persians, speaks of it in one of those books of his history which treat of the times that long preceded the empire of Cyrus. Hence, Selden, with much reason, concludes that it was neither instituted by that conqueror nor had anything to do with his alleged victory over the Sakya. Heskius calls it a Scythian festival, and I believe him to be right in his opinion, though I am persuaded that it was styled Sakya not so much from the Sakya as from the god of the Saka, or sorry, not so much from the Saka themselves, right, as it is from the god of the Saka, that is Saka or Woden, right? More context on that. I mean, if you're familiar with my previous content before watching this, and you already know what's going on here, but or if you're just familiar with the mysteries, right? It's Mercury. The ancient Persian mountaineers were undoubtedly a branch of the Scuths or Goths. He keeps saying Scuths. I thought it was a typo at first, but he's referring to the Scythians because they have all these weird little words and stuff that you can find like any reference for in modern day, but it's the Scythians. So the Scuths or Goths and the Kuthic Empire of Nimrod, the builder of Babel, was founded by the same intrepid and adventurous race, whence we find it expressly called a Scythian empire. Saka or Buddha, therefore, was equally worshipped by the Chusas of the Indian Caucasus. Keep in mind, Buddha in modern day in Hinduism is associated astrologically with Mercury. Therefore, it was equally worshipped by the Chusis of the Indian Caucasus, the old Iranians, the Scuths or Chusdim of Babylonia, and the Gothic and Saxon conquerors of Europe. Accordingly, Hesychius tells us that among the Babylonians, Siccus was the appellation of the planet Mercury or Buddha, and the prophet Jeremiah speaks of Sisak as a well-known principal idol of Babylon, denominating him Malak Sisak or King Sisak, agreeably to the custom prevalent among the idolaters. Okay, so you see what's going on there. Now then, Buddha, Mercury, Hindu, just as a, I mean, anybody can confirm this in a couple seconds. In Hinduism, Buddha is the name for the planet Mercury and is a key figure in the Hindu zodiacal system and Vedic astrology, right? It's not a coincidence, like I said before. It's an underlying tradition. It's like you'd have to have your eyes closed to not see, right? Like I know that it's not easy to put all these things together because there's so much, but when it's presented, right, you would have to be blind to not see and just to not be able to logically infer that, these people, like, why would they be isolated? Nothing happens in isolation. Of course not. No, they're all talking to each other, right? All these myths and mythologies and traditions and mystery rites, they're all making their way all over the place. All over the place. This is why you have people reading old works from the 1600s talking about the Aztecs wandering in the wilderness for 40 fucking years. This is why you have Native Americans worshiping Yahweh and so on and so forth. Like it's just, I don't know. It makes complete sense, right? That we see what we see because this is how real life works, right? It's only in like a religious echo chamber where you have to come up with apologist type arguments to pretend that none of this correlates. Anyway, hopefully that was uh, a new insight into some of the origins of Christmas and traditions that flow into it. Much love.